Hello. Everything happened just 2 days ago at what was supposed to be a romantic getaway with my wife Emma at Blue Ridge Mountain Resort. The first red flag should have been when Emma insisted on bringing her work phone on our vacation. She's never needed two phones before, but suddenly 3 months ago, she started carrying this second iPhone, claiming her company required it for security reasons. I didn't think much of it at the time. She works in corporate finance, so it seemed plausible enough. We arrived at the resort on Friday afternoon. Everything seemed perfect at first. The mountain views were breathtaking. Our suite had a private hot tub, and Emma seemed genuinely excited about our weekend together. We had dinner at the resort's upscale restaurant, shared a bottle of wine, and ended up having passionate sex back in our room. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have such an amazing wife. Saturday morning is when things started getting weird. Emma said she needed to take a business call and disappeared for nearly 2 hours. When she came back, her hair was slightly messy, and she had this guilty look on her face that I'd never seen before. She claimed she'd been walking around the resort's garden while on the call to get some fresh air. But when I checked her step count on her Apple Watch later, we share our fitness data. It showed she'd barely moved during those 2 hours. That evening, we had a couple's massage scheduled. I arrived at the spa first, and the receptionist gave me a confused look. "Oh, Mr. Anderson, I thought you'd changed your couple's massage to a single session for your wife? She came in with another gentleman about an hour ago." My blood ran cold. Emma had told me she was going to the gym. I managed to keep my composure and asked the receptionist to confirm what time my wife's massage was scheduled. She pulled up the booking on her computer and showed me Emma Anderson and Jason Miller for 30 p.m. The name meant nothing to me, but the timing matched perfectly with when Emma said she'd be at the gym. I went back to our room and waited. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of everything. The second phone, the long business call, the massage with another man. I opened my laptop and did something I'd never done before. I checked our shared iCloud account. Emma had forgotten to turn off location sharing on her work phone. The GPS history showed multiple visits to a hotel in our hometown over the past 3 months, always during her late nights at the office. When Emma finally returned to our room around 6 p.m., she was glowing and relaxed from her massage. She started making up some story about the gym being too crowded, but I cut her off mid-sentence. "How was your massage with Jason?" The color drained from her face. She tried to play it cool, claiming Jason was a colleague who happened to be at the resort with his family, and they'd run into each other by chance. But I'd already seen her second phone light up with a message from Jay that read, "Can't wait for tonight, baby." I grabbed her phone before she could stop me. Hundreds of messages between them going back months. Pictures, videos, plans for their meetups, everything. And then I found something that made my stomach turn. A video chat from just that morning, during her business call. The preview thumbnail showed enough to confirm my worst fears. That's when Emma's mask finally cracked. She broke down crying, not out of remorse, but because she'd been caught. She started blaming me for working too much, for not being emotionally available, for not understanding her needs. Classic cheater's script. But I wasn't about to sit there and listen to her justifications. I had something else in mind entirely. As I stood there holding her phone, watching Emma's carefully constructed lies crumble around her, something inside me snapped. 6 years of marriage, countless memories, all tainted by her betrayal. But I wasn't about to let her see me break down. Instead, I felt an eerie calm wash over me as I started formulating my plan. "Who else knows about Jason?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Emma looked surprised by my composure, probably expecting me to yell or storm out. She hesitated before admitting that her best friend Madison had been covering for her, feeding me lies whenever she was actually with Jason. Madison, the same woman who'd been a bridesmaid at our wedding, who'd had dinner at our house countless times with her husband Keith. I scrolled through more messages while Emma sat on the bed, alternating between sobbing and trying to explain herself. The messages revealed something interesting. Jason wasn't just some random guy. He was a client at her firm, married with 3 kids. They'd met during a corporate retreat in March, and things had escalated quickly from there. But here's the kicker, His wife Olivia had no idea, and Jason had a lot more to lose than just his marriage. Please, Emma begged. We can work through this. I'll end it with Jason, I'll go to counseling. I'll do anything you want. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away, disgusted. This wasn't the woman I married. That woman had died the moment she decided to betray everything we'd built together. I discovered that Jason had booked a room in the same resort, just 2 floors below us. Room 412. Emma's messages showed they had plans to meet there at 9 p.m., while I was supposed to be at the resort's poker tournament. She'd even bought new lingerie for the occasion. The same lingerie she told me she was saving for our anniversary next month. Give me your wedding ring, I said quietly. Emma's eyes widened, but she slowly slipped off the 3-carat diamond ring I'd spent a year saving up for. As I pocketed it, she started rambling about how she'd made a terrible mistake, how Jason meant nothing to her, how she'd just gotten caught up in the excitement. I ignored her pleas and opened my own phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found Madison's number. Emma lunged for my phone, but I easily held her back. "What are you doing?" she asked, panic creeping into her voice. "Oh, just making some calls," I replied calmly. "You're not the only one who can play games, Emma." I stepped into the bathroom and locked the door, leaving her pounding on it from the other side. First, I called Keith, Madison's husband. It was time he knew what kind of woman he was married to. Then I pulled up Facebook and found Olivia Miller's profile, Jason's wife. She deserved to know the truth too. But those calls were just the beginning. I had something much bigger planned for 9 p.m. Emma had no idea, but during our 6 years of marriage, I'd learned quite a bit about corporate finance through her, including some very interesting details about insider trading laws and client confidentiality agreements. And those messages on her phone? They contained a gold mine of information that both the SEC and Jason's company would find very interesting. I heard Emma's phone buzz with a new message from Jason. "Got the champagne chilling, baby. Can't wait to taste you tonight." I smiled to myself. Oh, there would definitely be a memorable encounter in room 412 tonight, but not the kind they were expecting. When I emerged from the bathroom, Emma was sitting on the edge of the bed, mascara streaked down her face. She'd been texting Jason, warning him that I knew everything. I could see the messages on her phone. "He knows. Don't come tonight. Please respond." But Jason, that arrogant bastard, hadn't even read her messages yet. "Your stuff will be on the front lawn when you get home," I told her, my voice cold and detached. "I already called the locksmith to change the codes. Don't bother trying to come back to the house." Emma started to protest, but I cut her off. "And you might want to update your resume. Your firm's ethics board will have some interesting reading material on Monday morning." The look of horror that crossed her face was almost comical. "You wouldn't," she whispered. "That would destroy my career. I'd never work in finance again." She was right. The messages on her phone showed her sharing confidential client information with Jason, discussing stock trades before public announcements, and breaking about a dozen industry regulations. "Funny how you're more worried about your career than your marriage," I observed. That's when my phone buzzed a text from Keith, Madison's husband. He wanted to meet. Perfect timing. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Emma called after me, her voice cracking with panic. "To get a drink with Keith," I replied without turning around. "You remember Keith, right? Madison's husband? The guy whose wife helped you destroy our marriage? We have a lot to talk about." I met Keith in the resort's bar. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. "How long have you known?" he asked as soon as I sat down. I showed him the messages I'd found, including the ones where Madison and Emma discussed their cover stories for the affairs. Turns out Madison hadn't just been covering for Emma. She'd been having her own affair with a personal trainer from their gym. Keith ordered a scotch with shaking hands. "I had no idea," he mumbled. "All those times Madison said she was with Emma." His voice trailed off as the implications sank in. "Want to help me with something?" I asked, checking my watch. It was 8:30 p.m. Jason's waiting in room 412 for his romantic evening with my wife. But I think he deserves a different kind of surprise. Keith's eyes hardened as he looked up from his drink. What did you have in mind? I pulled out my phone and showed him the email I drafted to Jason's company's board of directors, the SEC, and several financial news outlets. Attached were screenshots of messages showing clear evidence of insider trading, along with hotel receipts and expense reports where Jason had billed his meetings with Emma to the company. That'll ruin him, Keith said, a hint of admiration in his voice. Oh, that's just the beginning, I replied, pulling up another email addressed to Olivia Miller. But first, we need to make a few stops. Tell me, Keith, does Madison still have that spare key to your lake house? Because I noticed some interesting charges on her credit card statements from there. The pieces of my plan were falling into place. Emma had texted me twice more, begging me to talk to her, to let her explain. I ignored the messages. Instead, I focused on my next moves. The resort security office was our first stop. I had some very interesting surveillance footage to request. Then we needed to pick up a special delivery I'd arranged from the front desk. And finally, we had a very important meeting in room 412 at 9 p.m. Jason had no idea what was coming. Neither did Emma, or Madison, or any of them. They thought they were so clever with their secret phones and hidden messages. But they were about to learn a harsh lesson about karma. And I was going to be its teacher. The security footage from the resort told an even uglier story than I'd imagined. Emma and Jason hadn't just been meeting during her business calls. They'd been brazenly flaunting their affair all over the resort. The footage showed them kissing in the stairwell, holding hands in the garden, and disappearing into his room multiple times. Each clip felt like a knife twisting in my gut, but I forced myself to watch. I needed to understand the full scope of their betrayal. Keith sat beside me in the security office, his face growing darker with each new revelation. The head of security, a former police officer named Mike, had been surprisingly helpful after I explained the situation. He'd even offered to accompany us to room 412, sensing that things might get heated. There's something else you should know, Mike said, pulling up footage from the resort's restaurant. Your wife's friend Madison? She was here earlier today too. With this guy. The screen showed Madison wrapped around a man who definitely wasn't Keith. The timestamp was from just 3 hours ago. Keith's hands clenched into fists. That's Ryan, our personal trainer. His voice was barely a whisper. They told me they had a training session today, at our usual gym, 40 miles from here. I checked my watch, 8:50 p.m. Time to go, I said, standing up. Mike, you have everything ready? He nodded, patting the manila envelope on his desk. Inside was enough evidence to destroy multiple marriages, careers, and reputations. But that wasn't even the best part. We made our way to the 4th floor. My phone buzzed again. Olivia Miller had finally responded to my message. She was already on her way to the resort. Perfect timing. I'd sent her just enough information to get her attention, saving the worst revelations for her arrival. Standing outside room 412, I could hear music playing inside. Jason had expensive taste. It sounded like classical, probably trying to set a romantic mood. If only he knew what was actually about to happen. Keith positioned himself by the emergency stairwell while Mike stood ready with his master keycard. At exactly 9 p.m., Emma came hurrying down the hallway, still wearing the dress from dinner. She stopped dead in her tracks when she saw me. What are you doing here? She gasped. Before she could react, the elevator dinged again. This time it was Madison, her face going pale as she saw Keith emerge from the stairwell. Looking for Ryan? Keith asked his wife, his voice dripping with contempt. He's not here, but I'm sure you can explain why you were planning to meet him, right? Just like you can explain these. He held up his phone, showing photos from their lake house security cameras. Madison started stammering excuses, but was interrupted by another arrival, Olivia Miller, Jason's wife, stepping out of the second elevator. Her face was a mask of cold fury. The timing couldn't have been more perfect if I'd orchestrated it myself. Shall we all go in? I asked, nodding to Mike. I believe Jason's expecting company, though probably not quite this much company. Mike swiped his master key, and the door to room 412 swung open, The scene inside was exactly what I'd hoped for. Jason, wearing nothing but a hotel bathrobe, stood by the champagne bucket he'd mentioned in his text. His smug expression morphed into shock as he saw not just Emma, but our entire group enter the room. The classical music provided a surreal soundtrack to the unfolding chaos. "Everyone take a seat," I commanded, my voice steady. "It's time for some truth-telling. And trust me, we've got plenty of truth to share tonight." The silence in room 412 was deafening as I pulled out my phone and connected it to the room's Bluetooth speaker, cutting off the classical music. "Let's start with a little audio presentation," I said, my finger hovering over the play button. "Emma, you might recognize this from this morning's business call." The color drained from both Emma and Jason's faces as their intimate conversation filled the room. Olivia's hands gripped the armchair so hard her knuckles turned white. But that was just the beginning. I had a carefully curated selection of their greatest hits, every declaration of love, every planned deception, every time they laughed about fooling their spouses. "Turn it off," Jason demanded, trying to maintain his authority even in his bathrobe. "You have no right." "No right?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Let's talk about rights, Jason. Like your company's right to know you've been sharing insider trading information with my wife. Or the SEC's right to investigate these interesting stock trades I found in your messages." I held up a stack of printed screenshots. "Or maybe your wife's right to know about the college fund money you've been spending on luxury hotels." Olivia's head snapped up at that last part. "The children's college fund?" Her voice was deadly quiet. Jason started to speak, but she cut him off. "Our children's future? You spent our children's money on hotel rooms for your affair." While Jason tried to stammer out explanations, I turned to Madison. "Your turn." I played a recording from the lake house security system, capturing her afternoon with Ryan in vivid detail. Keith stood there, stone-faced, as his wife's infidelity was laid bare. "All those times you covered for Emma," Keith said to Madison, his voice thick with disgust. "You were covering for yourself too, using our lake house, the one we got married at, for your affair." Emma tried to approach me, tears streaming down her face. "Please, stop this. We can work it out. I'll do anything." "Like you did this morning?" I cut her off. "Let's show everyone what you were really doing during that 2-hour business call." I pulled up the video chat preview from her phone. Emma collapsed into a chair, finally realizing the extent of what I'd discovered. That's when Mike stepped forward, opening his manila envelope. "Mr. Miller, Mrs. Anderson, we have extensive security footage of your activities on resort property." He laid out several photographs. "This is a family resort. Some of your activities in public areas violate multiple laws." Jason finally lost his composure. "You can't do this to me. I have a reputation to protect. A career." I corrected him. "You had a career. Check your email." Right on cue, his phone started buzzing with notifications. I timed the emails to his company's board and the SEC to deliver at exactly this moment. "Oh, and Olivia? Your lawyer will be very interested in the evidence I've collected. I've already sent everything to her office." Madison tried to reach for Keith, but he stepped away. "The lake house footage is already with our lawyer," he told her, "along with the credit card statements showing how much of our savings you spent on your affair. Hope Ryan was worth it. As for you," I turned to Emma, removing her wedding ring from my pocket. "Remember how you said this ring symbolized our eternal love?" I walked to the window and opened it. The cool mountain air rushed in. "Guess what? Nothing is eternal." I threw the ring out into the darkness, watching her crumple as the symbol of our marriage disappeared into the night. "We're done here," I announced, standing up. "Olivia, Keith, your lawyers will have everything by morning. Jason, the SEC opens at 9 a.m. I'd expect their call early." I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. "Emma, don't come home. Ever. Your things will be with your parents by tomorrow night. And if any of you try to retaliate or twist this story," I gestured to Mike, who held up his phone, "this entire conversation has been recorded. with everyone's knowledge, since it's posted right there on the door. Resort policy. I left them all there, surrounded by the evidence of their betrayals. The last thing I heard as the door closed was Olivia starting to scream at Jason about their children's college fund. My work was done. Their perfectly constructed worlds of lies were burning down, and I had lit the match. Thank you for listening the story to the end. Write your thoughts about it in the comments and do not forget to subscribe. See you in the next videos. Bye.